Okay. The Millennium Development Goals established by the UN in the year 2000 aimed at ending hunger and poverty and guaranteeing that every child had access to education by the year 2015. Brazil is a partner of the UN in achieving these goals and it has hosted the Conference for Sustainable Development, Rio +20, Rio Mais 20, in 2012, and it has made some advancements. So it's an honor for me as a Brazilian to be mediating this debate today, which brings us all here to discuss the new Sustainable Development Goals and how to ensure girls and women are empowered and become central to the post-2015 agenda. It's an honor to be here, especially for being among such brilliant guests, people who have truly and effectively changed the world through their actions, like Muhammad Yunus, the Nobel Peace Prize winner in 2006, and a UN Foundation board member. Kathy Calvin, President and Chief Executive Officer of the UN Foundation. Nadine Gassman, President Resident Representative of the UN Women in Brazil. Luisa Bairros, Minister of the Secretariat for Policies to Promote Racial Equality in the Presidency of Brazil from 2011 to 2014. Camila Morsch, Senior Manager for the Newton Fund at the British Council in São Paulo. And Regina Madaloso, she is an Associate Professor at INSPER. Unfortunately, we had also Ted Turner, the founder of CNN and one of the founders of the UN Foundation here today, but he could not be here with us, unfortunately. I welcome you all. Thank you for being here. I also welcome the audience. I have to tell you that you can follow the discussion further online. It's being live streamed right now, and you can watch this further at SocialGood.org. And if you also want to share this while you are watching, please use the hashtag women and hashtag SocialGood, so we can all share what you all are discussing. My name is Adriana Carranca. I'm a journalist. I cover issues of women and girls and human rights. You can also follow me in the social media, and please do so we can discuss this further. This is very important to all of us. Last but not least, I'd love to spend all day here in the company of such brilliant guests, but unfortunately we have only 1 hour. So I ask you to keep your answers to 3 minutes each, and then we can open for the public to make some questions as well at the end. Thank you. I will start with Kathy Calvin. When the UN Foundation was founded in 1998, the board made empowering women one of your 3 priorities. Why do you think this was a good investment?
Great, thank you, and bom dia. And it's good to be here. Bom dia to everyone. Thank you, obrigada. You've heard all of my Portuguese now. I know all of you speak more English than I speak Portuguese. Well, let me say for the United Nations Foundation, the investment in girls and women to us was the most important thing we could do to change the trajectory from poverty to prosperity all over the world, because we know if you invest in a girl, you're investing in her family, her community, and the whole world. She can change everything. And so in many ways, this year, 2015, is probably the best year ever to be born a girl, because we've come a long way in terms of the number of girls dying in childbirth, the number of girls who now can can enter school and stay in school, the number of young women who have access to reproductive health. But we have a long way to go. And so we spend a lot of time at the UN Foundation thinking about the world we want. And I think it's the world you want. It's a world in which you have the right to enter school and stay in as long as you can and move on to a job at which you are paid equal value for equal work. That you want to have the opportunity to start a family when you want and have the number of children you want. That's your choice. And that you are an equal in your society. We know women are not just victims, but are the actors and the change agents for the world we want. So for us, investing in reproductive health, access to services and supplies, investing in keeping girls in school, delaying marriage, and giving them the opportunity to plan and control their lives are just really essential pieces of our work. And of course, this is not just because it's the right thing to do, but we also know it's the smart thing to do, because we've seen communities and countries that have prioritized women and given them these rights also see great increases in their national economies. So for all of these reasons, we, working with the UN, with UN Women, and all the other agencies, have found this to be just such an encouraging and big opportunity. So we're happy to be here today talking about this. And thank you, Ariana.
Thank you. I would just like to remind you that the questions that we are asking the panelists today were sent to us before by the audience. Of course, we couldn't ask all the questions, but we gathered some in groups, so we are trying to cover all the issues that you sent to us in your questions. Mr. Mohammed Yunus, it's been said that women make the best of social investments. When you invest in girls and women, they make the best of it. How do you think that is so? And in your experience, could you mention some examples of this?
Well, thank you. We started something, lending money to poor people, but gradually we moved in the direction of lending money to the women. Because I confronted a controversy with the banking institutions. I was accusing them for not opening their door to people who are at a lower income level, and accusing them that even half the world's population have no access to financial services. That became a kind of a nasty debate with them. Gradually I add one more piece into it. I said, not only you reject poor people or people below the middle income level, you also reject women. You don't have women to serve, because in Bangladesh, 99% of your borrowers happen to be men. I said, something terribly wrong with your system. So when I began to address the problems of the poorest people in the village, I started lending money with the decision that I will have at least half the borrowers of my work must be women. So that was my intention, because I was accusing the existing banks, so I wanted to correct it in my one. It was a difficult task, because women themselves didn't think they should borrow money, do something, but they pleaded that I don't know anything, give it to my husband, and all this thing. Gradually we had to move on back and forth to explain and build confidence in them. Actually, it was more of a lack of confidence, because they are rejected by the system so much. They forgot their own ability to do things on their own. So when we achieved that 50-50, it took us 6 years to achieve that 50-50. Then we saw that money going to the family through women brought so much more benefit to the family than money going to the family through men. In every case you see is very vividly, very clearly. It's not only repayment. People sometimes say, oh, women pay you back better than others. No, repayment-wise, we had no problem between the two. But the impact-wise, benefit-wise, it was so much more benefit if the woman is the borrower. Children become the beneficiary if the mother is the borrower. You don't see it when the father is the borrower, children benefiting from that. Women took very good care of the money that we gave her so that she got the best mileage out of it, did best thing that she could, but not you don't see it in men and so on. So you go on listing all this. Then we decided, why don't we switch completely, focus on women rather than 50-50. So as a result, we became 96, 97% of our borrowers as women. Today we have 8.5 million borrowers in our bank, Grameen Bank that we created. 97% of them are women. And on top of it, we made that bank owned by the borrowers. So what happened, since borrowers are all women, actually it's a bank owned by the women. So that's again another thing, and as a result, they managed the bank very well. They continued to expand and continued to do so many things, send their children to school, made sure every child goes to school. The mothers who are in Grameen Bank, even their husbands, are totally literate. They never went to school, but they want to make sure that the children don't repeat the same thing that they did. So they send their children to school. So it's enormously beneficial when you do that. And that changes that happens in the standing of the women, dignity of the women. It tremendously transpires in every direction that we have done later on, many other work that we did. Thank you.
Beautiful. I think this leads us to the next question, how to promote sustainable gender equality, how to make those policies sustainable. Maybe Nadine Gassman, would you like to answer that?
Thank you very much, and it's a very relevant question. We just launched a report this last week talking about transforming the economy. And this report we launched last week from UN Women shows how much the economy is the ways it has not worked for women, and how much the economies, the macroeconomies need to change. And we have proposals. It's not just the critique of the way the macroeconomy works, but we talk about what steps can be taken so the economies work for women, how macroeconomy needs to work based on human rights, on gender equality. And when you start thinking that macroeconomy not only has to take care of inflation, which is an obsession of economists, and I think there's a lot of economists in this room, but it has to work to have policies that promote equality, the way you think about and the way you think how we're going to finance these policies, the game changes. This report talks about 3 pillars to go from equality to substantive equality. And what is it which we're talking about? For the last 20 years, since the Beijing Declaration, the Beijing, I'm now not talking nor Portuguese nor English anymore. Since the Beijing Declaration, we have made a lot of progress in having laws, policies that promote equality. Now we're in a moment with the Sustainable Development Goals that we need to make this work for everyday's life in women's life. And this substantive equality need 3 pillars. We talk about resources, how we make these socio-economic and political resources available to women through decent work, public policies and macroeconomic policies, how we do it with respect, and for that we need to change the stereotype, we need to address violence against women, and we give voices to the women, to all the women. And we will talk more about that.
Fantastic. Thank you. When we talk about macroeconomics, we also talk about governments. And Luisa Baijos has spent 4 years in the government in the first round of President Dilma's government. What were the main barriers that you encountered in ensuring girls and women empowerment and gender equality when you look at that from the point of view of a government?
Well, Actually, my answer, it has to do with the proposal of the Sustainable Development Goals, because within the Brazilian government last year, we gave a lot of time in terms of thinking of a Brazilian position, a Brazilian proposal for what we call SDGs. And I think that the first main challenge is to reconcile the idea of people and development. Because most of the time, when we talk about development, we are able to mention different social, populational groups, but at the same time, those groups, they are treated in terms of the development as if they were a problem, as if they were an obstacle. And that is true in regards to women, to indigenous peoples, to blacks, and many other groups which have been historically discriminated against. And it's very interesting because in the process, after the Rio Plus 20 conference, it was very important to discuss that the Sustainable Development Goals should include children and youth especially, with no distinction in terms of sex, ethnicity, migratory status, and things like that. But at the same time, there is very little discussion about the background of the situation of women, of children, of blacks, and other groups. And when I say background, I'm talking about political and ideological issues, because what makes those groups be part of the lower levels of society is the fact that they are discriminated against based on gender, based on race, based on ethnicity, and other determinations. In a certain sense, think about violence, domestic work, sexual and reproductive health, control over poverty and property, participation in decision making is something that cannot change if you do not address issues of patriarchy, issues of sexism. This is that brings us to another type of consideration, is still within the SDGs, that have to be with the need to not only think about empowerment of women, but at the same time thinking about reducing inequality within countries and between countries. That is a very important and complementary task that we have when we think about women and power and access of power. And a second aspect that I think it's very important in terms of giving to the academic scholarship based on women interest, to reinforce those movements that women carry out on a daily basis in society, because the new knowledge that has been created in terms of how to tackle inequalities, it doesn't come from governments. It comes from movements. It comes from an academic scholarship that has a commitment with change, a commitment with justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this also leads us to the discussion of the problem of how scarce the resources are to fund these women's movements. Camila would like to comment on that.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I would be glad just to leave my other 3 minutes to Luisa. It's just too fabulous to hear her speak.
We'll go back to her later.
Great. So I think it's important just to frame empowerment first before we go to the funds. I think Minister Luisa just gave us a hint that when we talk about empowerment, we are talking about equality. And we talk about equality, we're talking about freedom. So Maya Angelou says, right, give me equality and I'll be free. So when we talk about directing investment towards women, I think we have to look into creating conditions that are material, political, and legal conditions for women to make free choices. And that's, in my framework, it's empowerment, pretty much it. Of course, if we think about resources in this way, we also need, in my view, to shape a bit our discourse in what justifies investment in women. For instance, like in the last 5 to 10 years, we have a shift of the discourse from a rights-based discourse to an economy-based discourse. And pretty much Kathy here, she put these two things for us to think about. We do it because it's the right thing to do, but we do it because it's smart. Unfortunately, the smart discourse, and many times it's much more apparent to bring these resources in so we can have political transformation. And that's what happened in the last 5 to 10 years. We see a lot of private sector investment making a lot of difference, but relating to this discourse that it's economy-based. And that weakens the movement in a sense, because we lose the bond to the equality frame that we first thought about. So this is very important. And I think this pretty much permeates the whole of the world of investment. And then when I talk about the whole of the world of investment, we have social investors, private social investors, we have aid, and aid relates to development, and pretty much it's a piece of the budget of developed countries that mandatorily goes to development, so to emerging economies or poor countries, depending on the choice of each country. And these levels can range from 0.3 to 0.8% of the GDP, which is not little. The question is, where do we direct these investments to? And then, again, we've talked here about the fact that historically vulnerable populations, historically oppressed populations, haven't been part of the scenario. And this is very, very ironic. Like, for instance, now at British Council, we are thinking, and we are going to do this, we are going to open a line for investment for master schools students, black women in particular, to go to the UK on a full ride scholarship. And we are going to have like an English course type of program attached to the scholarship. Because what happens in Brazil is we have a range of, just numbers, millions of people thinking about diversity and inclusion, but we haven't been able to invest in our people that are coming out of the universities as beneficiaries of the quotas. So these women are not getting any place in the market. That's just a very, very little example. We don't have one line for black women scholarship in Brazil. Not only one. So how do we target the investment so we can pretty much fulfill the framing that empowerment is equality, and give me equality and I'll be able to make free choices. So I think that's the framework we need to put forward.
Great. Thank you. Would you like to comment on that, Minister, on the ratio issue that you mentioned, how to ensure the cross between racial discrimination and gender discrimination, that they are, how they sum up together, and how to ensure that they don't.
I think that's the. Oops.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I think that is the second part of our challenge, because when we talk about discrimination against women, when we talk about creating conditions or for gender equity, sometimes we are not seeing very clearly that there are differences or inequalities between women of different groups, of different racial groups, of different regions, and many other considerations that we can make here. And so I'm very glad to hear that the British Council is, for example, setting up a scholarship geared toward black women, because that is the kind of initiatives that we have to reinforce. There is no way to overcome inequality among women or between women and men if we do not adopt social policies, and social policies based on affirmative action principles, because that is the resource or the tool that we have, at least here in Brazil, to accelerate the process of inclusion of the big masses of black men and women that have been put aside in terms of development in most part of the history of our society.
We also know, and this is very true in Brazil, that many women remain the main, if not the sole providers of their families. Maybe, Regina, could you comment on the importance of having safety nets or care nets to low-income women?
Hi, hello everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. And I only will take my 3 minutes because I want to hear you more. I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that labor force participation is very different if you analyze different quintiles of income. For example, in Brazil, 2012, for the lowest quintile of income, only 48% of females were participating. 36% of them were employed. If we look to the highest quintile of income, we have 84% of women active in the labor force, 80% of them were employed. Why is that? We have many, many reasons. Some of them are related to the fact that women are the sole responsible for their children and their family many, many times. But another thing, do we have schools, childcare for young children? Do you have means to put these kids in some place when the mother goes to work? In a research that we conducted in São Paulo in 2012, we got the answer by these mothers that more than 20% of them were not working because they do not have a person to take care of their kids, they couldn't pay, and they do not have schools to put these kids. And it's not only the school, it's a full-time school. If you get to work, you have to be a full-time employed in Brazil. It's very rare to be part-time employed. How can you put your kid in school if the schools last from 7 to noon? What will you do with this kid during the afternoon? So these mothers have a huge problem. And we know that if they can engage in the labor force participation, they will get the income, the money, that can avoid them to suffer from domestic violence. The money can be invested on their kids, on quality of education. So we have many, many things that could come as a good investment on increasing this net of care or school availability to all the kids.
Thank you. You all mentioned policies for women to empower women. When women come to the leadership, perhaps Mr. Mohamed Yunus can answer that. When you bring women to the leadership, what changes? What women can bring to the table when they become leaders?
Well, they can do good things, they can do bad things, just like anybody else. So I wouldn't think that just because women is a leader, everything gets solved. But it's important that how the women became leader. Sometimes they were competing with men to become leaders. In the process, they become a sort of men because they imitated all the things that they've done. By the time they reach the top level, they are hardly maintaining their women part of it. It's more of a male world, male things, and so on. So we need to encourage women leadership, not just a few separate one who kind of outstanding leaders. It should be broadly based, it layers by layers, not just suddenly on the top somebody shows up. It's very important that women remain in leadership role in every single thing, not just in a political leadership role. It's a social leadership, it's an economic leadership, and everything. And there I particularly emphasize, I'll put it again, that the natural thing for women is to become entrepreneur rather than work for somebody. It fits into their own talent. That's what we do in Grameen Bank, for example. All the things that you heard about microcredit. Microcredit leads women to become entrepreneurs, not workers, not to work for somebody else. And that's why they feel comfortable. That's why they could send their children to school. They want to do things. And in the process, there's the layers of their leadership thing among the women themselves. The groups, group chairpersons, secretaries, center chiefs, become member of the board of the Grameen Bank, and many other things they have done along the way because they felt confident. They have the resources in their command. It's not something they imitated anybody. They were competing with men to take his position. They created their own positions. So I think entrepreneurship is the most important thing for women, and that needs a financial system to work for them. So leadership and everything is related to how you unfold your own internal capacity, capacity that you have inside of you, but never had a chance to do that. I tell the young people in Bangladesh, both men and women, I said, don't ever try to go into jobs. I said, job is a very old-fashioned idea. It's coming from old centuries. You are in a new century. So don't even look at that. You convince yourself you are not a job seeker, you are a job creator, and be a job creator. And that way you think like a job creator, you think big, not just tiny thing, and act like a job creator. In order to do that, we create social business fund, encourage all young people come up with business ideas, men, women, whoever. So now girls find it very convenient. They don't have to leave home. They don't have to leave to go to some other place to work and so on. They build up their businesses at home and we go into the store front and so on and so forth. And they're very creative. So I would say that this is a very natural thing for women to do that. So instead of kind of looking at to follow what the men have done, I would say women has to build up their own world the way it fits into their lifestyle, their own way they work, the way they have time for themselves. So this is one thing I think very important to do, and that is maybe the new leadership, and not the leadership that we have seen among men. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question here that was made by many of the people from the audience. As we are discussing the SDGs, how to ensure that gender equality is established as a cross-cutting theme across all the SDGs. Any of you, I will leave the question for who wants to answer that.
Well, I think that's one of the big challenges and objectives of the negotiations now. It's not only to have an SDG that is gender equality, and that it's not only an objective and it's negotiated and it's financed, but all the indicators and all the targets are mainstream, that in all the objectives we mainstream gender. And I think that's part that what's being negotiated at this point in time, and it's what we have learned in the past 15 years with the MDGs, that we need to have it in that to have gender, to have gender equality, to have empowerment of women and girls. It has to be in all parts of life. And when we talk about gender equality, and when we have now talk about substantive equality, we have to look at it in all the spheres of life, in financing, in transport, in tourism, in everything. And the only way to look at that is to measure it in all the indicators, in all the targets, and that's what's being negotiated now, and it's what we need to see it not only measured, but financed and invested in. And that's what we count on the member states to do at this point in the negotiations.
Thank you. I think Mrs. Kathy.
Yeah,
Sure.
Go ahead, now.
Okay, thank you.
And then Kathy.
Just to reinforce what Nadine said about the need for disaggregated data according to race, sex, age, migratory status, so that we can build indicators and targets for the Sustainable Development Goals. And in the recent past, with the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, we were not able to do that. And even in Brazil, although governments were free to decide what to do with the MDGs, even here in Brazil, we were not able to establish targets according to race, for example. And there is an example that I think it's that speaks a lot of the need of doing that has to do with maternal mortality in Brazil. Brazil has made a significant progress in terms of lowering its rates of maternal mortality. But at the same time, in any place in Brazil, the rate among black women are 3 times higher than the rate calculated for white women. So in terms of the general number, we see that things are getting better in terms of health of women in Brazil. But it's getting better for a determined group. And when I talk about maternal mortality, I'm not talking about poor women specifically, because this is something that happens in different social classes. Thus, what Nadine said about the need of targets and indicators specified according to the situation of different groups, I think that is something very important, whether we really want to achieve justice and sustainable development for all.
Kathy would like to comment.
Well, I think the 2 points I was going to make have been made, but I will add to Nadine's point that one of the earliest decisions made in selecting the 17 goals was that there needed to be a gender goal. So we've come a long way when that is no longer an if, but a how. And so then the how is, what are all the pieces that need to come into this? And this is where I agree with you, Minister. Data is critical. And we often don't disaggregate data by all the things you said, including age. So often we don't think about girls. And girls have, frankly, in the last 10 years come onto the agenda. It used to be only women that we talked about. And now we do talk about girls because we understand the sooner that we address these issues in a girl's life, we make a huge difference. So it's important that we see empowering girls and women. Even the order has changed, because if we don't give a girl the access to the choices she needs, we may never be able to help the woman she could become. So that's I think been a real shift that we've seen, and that the Sustainable Development Goals will really bring that into play fully. Finally, I think it's up to all of you to keep your voices loud and proud on watching that your government itself is leading in prioritizing these issues. We need to hear from young women. We need to hear from young men that we need to take care of girls and women. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir Mohammed.
Now, I just wanted to make that leaving anybody behind is not sustainable. So make it very clear. So whether it's on this case or in this case, you can go on and on. But the whole issue is, if you leave anybody behind, it's going to fall back on you again. It is not, you are not escaping from that. Then what created all those discrepancies and so on? That's what we have to look on. There are policies, we're talking about the policies. There are institutions. Institutions are very badly designed. So even if you have policy, if they are not changing the institutions, no hope. Like the institution of banking that I have been always talking about, which deprives people from facilities for no fault of their own. When I talk about poverty, I said poverty is not created by poor people. Poverty is created by the system. Nothing wrong with people, nothing wrong with human being. So why, now we keep on saying we want to improve poverty and get them over the poverty. Don't look at the poor people. Look at yourself. Look at the institutions that you built. Change them, and people come out on themselves. There's nothing, absolutely nothing with poor people. Similarly, on the gender issues, on the other issues, each human being is capable as anybody else. Each human being is packed with unlimited creative capacity. Wherever he or she is born, doesn't matter. Simply, society never gives them an opportunity to come out of the rut that they are in. This is what we have to look at. Look at the way system works. System works to take all the resources, all the wealth to the top. The top becomes very juicy, very well, up to the top. Bottom becomes empty. Who created it? You think they are very smart, that's why they are up? No. Simply system gave them the advantage to take things from the bottom to the top. So unless we redesign the system, it will continue to do so. Today, we are talking about the leaving people behind. Half the people on the planet, half the people, bottom half of the people, don't even own 1% of the total wealth of the entire world. What kind of world is that? Who created that? So your attention would be to look at the institutions, look at the concepts, the profit-centric world that we made it. As long as we remain focused on the profit-centric life, we are not getting away from it. We will be continuing with this concentration of wealth, concentration of power, concentration of all the facilities at the top, and the bottom will be empty.
Thank you. Thank you for such inspiring words. I think I'll have to end, unfortunately. We still have 10 minutes for the audience. Only one last question. Maybe Nadine could help us to clarify what are exactly the messages in terms of gender equality that are already being discussed in the development, post-2015 development agenda, and how do we move further?
Well, I think I'll resound, and I'm very honored on what Mr. Mohammed said. We're talking about stepping it up for a 50-50 planet, a planet that is equal for men and women. And I think on what you were saying, there's no other way around. We need to make a world equal for everybody. Not just for women and men, for all women and for all men. I think there's no way that we will have a sustainable world if it's not a world that is a world of equality. And we talked about there's no way, if we don't change the way we consume, if we don't change the way power is distributed in the world is not going to be sustainable. And it's up to all of us to change the way we are. So let's change.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much to all the panelists. Thank you very much. I will open for questions. Do we have a question from Twitter? Is there anyone? Yeah, she is. Everyone agrees we need to empower girls and women.
But how can we do it in a political and economic way? What are the practical proposals, sorry.
Yeah, if you could
Yes.
repeat that, please.
Everyone agrees we need to empower girls and build equality. But how can we do it in a political and economic way?
Does anyone?
I'll just say a couple ideas that get talked about a lot is girls and women make 78 cents on the dollar. So over a lifetime, they're earning 25% less. That's not right. It's not fair. It makes all the difference in the world in childcare and everything else. So we need to address that. That's number one. In a lot of countries, they're talking about quotas in terms of government positions, parliaments, and boards of government. That should be talked about as well. I don't love quotas, but I also think sometimes you don't get where you need to go unless you make a specific attempt. And third, I think women themselves need to be champions for the inclusive environment. And so we need to hear everyone's voices.
Sorry.
Okay, very quick. I think there are many examples here in the work of all of these people. Of course, we do too little yet. We have to do much more in terms of practical proposals. Like the scholarship I mentioned is just too modest even to mention. We have to think about macroeconomic policies, a financial system that works for women. But I want to dispute the first fundamental part of the question. Is everyone actually believing in equality? Like, for instance, is everyone in favor of equality? When we have so many attacks on feminism, for instance, with the inequality-based movement, are we all on the same page? That's just something for us to think about.
Mr. Mohammed?
It's one that I want to focus. Today is an enormous power that we have in our hand, particularly young people. Technology. Just Twitter gave the question right now. That's a tremendous power. So you, the young generation, is the most powerful generation in history. Previous generation didn't have this power, but you have it. And you have to be aware that you have something which none ever had. So what do you do with this technology? This technology is so powerful, it can do whatever you wish. It's almost like Aladdin's lamp. You remember Aladdin's lamp? You touch it and the genie comes out of it. And you say, and he says, "What do you want, master?" And you tell him what you want, and he gets it done. So now you have the Aladdin's lamp. You touch it, and the digital genie comes out. Say, "What can I do for you?" It will get it done, because that's the power you have. It sounds simple, but that's really it is. You look at your mobile phone, you touch it, you get everything done. And you can. This is the just elementary version of the mobile phone that you got. You just got it. No other generation ever had it. You are the first generation who. What kind of mobile phone you will hand over to your next generation? It will be enormously powerful. So imagine what technology, how technology will bring, and technology is at your disposal, not somebody in Silicon Valley or somewhere else. You can design things which nobody ever did before. You're only at your own time. With the fun time, you do that. We do that to change the world that it is right now. And then figure out what kind of world you want to make. Don't go to the tiny, tiny little things. Go for the big ones. Unless you get the big ones done, all the little ones will never get done. It will be only struggling with that. You have the big power, redesign the world the way you want, have imagination, what kind of world you want, what kind of girl that should grow up to see the next generation, you will see what should they have that you didn't have or previous generation didn't have. Imagine in a kind of absurd way, in a big way, not just fantasize that this is the world we will create. If you imagine, it will happen. If you don't imagine, it will never happen. So imagine it.
Thank you. I think we have 5 or 10 minutes, if I may, for questions. I see one girl there. If you could please tell your name, what you do, and to whom is your question directed. Okay.
Hi, my name is Thais, and I am a 4th-year student at FGV Law School, and also at University of São Paulo. I study philosophy there. And for Mr. Yunus, I'm a huge fan of your work. I've been studying it since, I don't know, 2009, and I'm really interested about that. And I am really interested about what you said, that 90% of the borrowers are women. And I thought that 3 minutes were not enough to elaborate on that because it's so inspiring. So I thought that maybe you could talk more about the process of making the diagnosis of the problem and seeing, and what actually did you do in order to change the focus of the lending of the money, and what can you see now that you have 96% of women as borrowers? And it's really interesting because here in Brazil we have the Bolsa Família. I don't know if you're aware, and the beneficiaries are women too. And maybe you could comment on how they are really similar, and I think that's really important for the empowerment of women and how they can begin to have freedom and equality. Thank you.
Well, for me it was simple how I did it. It was not difficult. I didn't know anything about banking, so every time I need to do something in my work, I look at the banks, how they do it, and once I learn how they do it, I just do the opposite. That's how it happened. They lend money to men, so I went to women. They lend money at the city center, I went to the village, remote village. They asked for collateral, I said, forget about collateral, we'll do something trust-based. They need lots of lawyers, we have no lawyers. We are the only bank in the world which doesn't have any lawyers. We are a lawyer-free bank. So, you see, the reason I'm saying that, you get used to the conventional way of doing things. And conventional way of doing things, conventional way of thinking things, create the conventional results you see. So how to undo that? Reverse it, and it will undo that. Because you are putting the gear forward, you go forward, and you see mess. You want to get out of it, you get the back gear, go someplace else. It takes you someplace else. So reversing is a very important process, how you do that. We have done it in the business world. In the banking world, we have taken away the whole idea of putting collateral in the middle of doing business. So it went to the people who have lots of collateral to offer. It never went to people who do not have it. We in business world, what we have done, we have taken away the whole idea of making personal profit, because they're all saying business means making money, make tons and tons of money. That's business. We said, forget it. We don't want to make money. We want to solve problems. And we start solving problems without having any intention of personally benefiting from it, taking any money. We call it social business. So we started social business. We come up with, we see a problem, all the problems we said, as a social business thinking process, as you're an entrepreneur, as I said, you're all entrepreneur. Look at that problem. Design a business to solve that problem. And suddenly you found out a way, and it works. It's sustainable because you don't have to run around for money. All you need to do is invest the first amount, and it recirculates. It's not something is a charity. In charity, you have to find money every time you want to do little things, and it's all over. Charity money has your own, only one life. But if you do it in a social business way, it's endless life. It continues and continues. So again, you ran away, or you separated yourself from a conventional thinking process. Profit making is the thing, you do that. And here I just mentioned, we are not job seekers. We are job givers. That's the reverse process too. And it's really true. We are not, human beings are not job seekers. Human beings are not born on this planet to work for somebody else. Human beings are always go-getters, always creative, always problem solver. Somehow somebody convinced us all, you have to finish our school and find a job.
Unfortunately, we have we have 1 minute, but I try to fit in still 1 or 2 questions, if they don't kill me. Here, and there was a lady there.
My name is Mariana Barbosa. The Brazilian government prefers giving money to alleviate poverty. So we have the Bolsa Família that was mentioned by the colleague. Minimum wage programs, and there's an issue of how do you take the people out of this system. How do you compare, because you were an advocate of entrepreneurship, of lending money, How do you compare a policy of microcredit to a policy of just giving monthly installments to alleviate poverty? How do you compare?
Transfer,
First
for
principle that the first principle that I accept and I support, people in distress have to be supported by the society. There's no compromise on that. But that's only one part of the responsibility. Second part of the responsibility is still more higher responsibility. Once you take care of her or him who is in distress, then the second responsibility is to make sure you help her to get out of that dependence. That's the most important part, because for the lifetime, she or he has to be on her feet. That's the most important thing is. And that's where I said people are not job seekers. People are not supposed to live at somebody else's mercy, because Creator has given us all the creative power inside of us. Why should it be at the mercy of anybody else? So we need to create institutions, create opportunities. It's not the fault of the person who is at the mercy of others. You kept him incapacitated because he doesn't have any opportunity. That's why some person like you unemployed. Can you explain to me why a young person is unemployed? There's nothing wrong with the person. So somehow system has put a spell on them. You can't do anything. That spell is on their mind that, oh, no, I'm not supposed to do anything because I don't have a job. We have taken away the power of thinking, no, I can do something for myself and do everything for everybody else. I have the capacity inside of her. That's why I said you are the most powerful generation in the human history. So make use of it. Make use of that power, and all the problem can be addressed by using that power and created a completely new, different world than the one we have got. So to answer your question about the dependency, it's not the fate of the people. It's artificially created. The fate of the people is to get her out and put her on the feet so that she becomes as creative, as productive as any human being on this planet.
We are in a battle here to try to have one or two more questions asked. There's one lady there and one here. If you could both tell your questions and then you try to answer in time. We have like 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, I'll be brief. My name is Juliana. I'm the founder of ThinkOg and co-founder of ThinkEva. Projects whose goals are to empower Brazilian women. And Nadine talked a little bit about violence against women and how can we overcome it in order to prosper economically, or do we have to prosper economically to overcome the violence, or is it a catch-22?
Hi, my name is Thais. I'm studying administration the last year here at INSPER. And my question is about how education can leverage to help to solve this inequality problem, not only in the sense that Regina pointed out that it helps children to be at school, but also in the sense that it helps women to have the power to enter the market and everything, what is being doing in the education terms to help the problem.
No, I think one of the important issues to address substantive equality has to do with education and changing the culture. And one of the essential things we need to get equality is to end violence against women, which has to do with the paradigm of power relationships. So when we talk about ending patriarchy, of changing, of talking about being equal, has to do with changing these power relationships. And we don't need to change the economy to do that. We need to change the way we respect each other, we see each other as equal, and the way we solve conflicts in a peaceful way. So I don't think we need to be rich or we need to be developed to change the way we treat each other. And I think that has to do with respect, with dignity, with seeing in front of us a person that is equal in dignity. That's it.
Well, quickly,
Yeah.
the education, I just take this point on the education. Yes, education is very important, but the right education. You have to be careful what education you're getting. Not the education which turns you into work for somebody else. That's not right education. The education which allows you to discover yourself. Not just read what others discovered. Discover yourself. That's the first thing to learn. Who am I? What am I doing here? What am I supposed to do? Those are the answered. Those questions has to be answered in the education question. Today we teach everything: physics, chemistry, history, everything. But doesn't talk about who am I? What am I supposed to do? What's my objective in this planet? I'll be here for a short time. What do I do? So that's very important thing, to find out your capacity, your ability, and your purpose in life. And then it becomes purposeful. You want to do things, get things done. And then all the other things start taking place because you're already aware of what you want to do, how you want to do it. Once you got it in your head, you will get it done. Thank you.
Well, very quickly, I just want to take on the education question as well. Completely agree with Mr. Yunus. I think in the social investment world, it has become very clear that education does not solve all of our problems. It's very, very important, but overwhelmingly, in the last 20 years, we've had pretty much 80 to 90% of social investment in education. And in this type of education, traditionally seen, traditionally understood, that Mr. Yunus just put forward, in order for us to be able to advance, in our opinion, at least in the groups of debates that I've been participating in terms of the role of education, we need to fund, we need to invest in political organization as well, much more than we've been doing, and also in race-based targets, because we haven't been financing race-based policies as well. And these two are quite detached to the education agenda. So either we reframe what we understand by education, or we start putting money and time and effort in other things, in my view.
Thank you. Kathy would like to wrap up this session.
Oh, I'd be happy to. Well, you know, the Secretary General reminds us that yours is the first generation to end poverty and hopefully the last to combat the worst effects of climate change. It's a big job, it's a big order. We know that empowering girls and women is at the heart of that, and if we can infuse everything we're doing, from making sure there are birth certificates to fair pay to ending violence, we can get there. Professor Yunus, you gave us the vision where we want to go and who we want to be. I think you reminded us that this is the generation that in 2030 will be running the world, and you already are. So help us get there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Wow. I just want to ask you to allow the panelists to leave the room first. We will have a wrap-up, an informal reception and a wrap-up session. Now they will be waiting for you in the basement, in the ground floor. Thank you so much for all who have been here today.